Retail trade volumes recorded their first year-on-year drop in more than 3 decades outside the pandemic, confirming a retail recession is slowing the nation's economy. Retail recession. Figures from the ABS show a third quarterly fall in spending in the 3 months to June as inflation and cost of living prices reduced shopping for essential and luxury goods. Prices rose 0.9% last quarter, which the ABS says led to the fall in sales, as figures show Australians spent more but bought less in the 3-month period. Let's bring in our business editor, Ross Greenwood. On retail sales, Ross, good morning, by the way. Car Sales says there's been a 40% spike on searches for pink cars in July. Any idea why?
I think it might be Barbie. Let's put it that way, shall I? So in other words, people are prepared to spend on what they're prepared to spend on still. And so there are still some examples. That is one. Pink cars, Car Sales says, and it's things like the Toyota Yaris, the Fiat 500, all the little cars that they kind of want to turn into pink cars these days. But there's other things as well, is airfares. But what you point out there is really symbolic of people cutting back. In other words, prices are rising. And so it's not that people are spending necessarily less money, but what they're doing is getting less goods. And you can actually see this one area that had held up right the way through all of the interest rate rises has been spending at cafes and restaurants. Now, for the first time, that's tipped downwards as well. And that shows that some of the discretionary spending is really starting to be cut back. And that, of course, affects business and therefore profitability. And this is the reason why eventually these rises in interest rates will eventually have an impact on employment, as these businesses need necessarily to cut back in the face of these slowing sales.
Okay, airfares, and we're not talking about Trump Airways here, is whether you're paying too much is again in the news today. Qantas says it's got no influence over government decisions about who flies here. Ross, it comes after Australia's biggest airport, Sydney, accused Qantas and Virgin of hoarding landing slots, leading to cancelled flights. Is this a classic case of supply and demand?
It is a classic case of supply and demand. There is no doubt. In other words, if there is not enough supply of airline seats, then the prices naturally must rise. Now, I'm going to show you a few things as we go through this and unpack it, because Qantas is denying everything and says there's nothing to see here. Don't even worry. Here's international airfares. This is the ACCC's numbers that came out. This is for June 2019. The average international fare into Australia before the pandemic was $1,213. You can see here how much it's increased by more than 51%. Everybody understands this. It's really, if you like, the basis. If there's not enough airlines flying into Australia, if there's not enough slots for them to actually take here in Australia, then ultimately you, the consumer, pay more. And that's coming from the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission.
But don't we have to split this, Ross, into international and domestic flying? Quite a difference. Quite
different, but exactly the same dynamics, supply and demand. So let's have a look here, and what we can show you is that during, say, April this year, in terms of domestic flight, that Qantas and Virgin flight 94% of the people. Now, you've got on the side Rex, which of course does more regional flying, but then you've got Bonza, which has come into the marketplace, which can't get slots into the major airports of Sydney and Melbourne, which they want. Now, effectively, what Sydney Airport's boss, Jeff Culbert, has been saying for months and months and months and months is really that the big airlines are hoarding slots. Now, by hoarding slots, that means there are more cancelled flights. This is what he's had to say. If incumbent airlines have decided to fly less between key domestic markets, then they should relinquish slots to domestic and international carriers who want to operate out of Sydney Airport and provide more choice for customers. The same would be absolutely true of Melbourne Airport as well. So in other words, the accusation is denied by the airlines vigorously that they are hoarding these slots. It's the reason why you get a lot of cancelled flights, simply so other airlines can't fill those slots. He says they've got to be opened up.
OK, just finally here, Ross, almost out of time, but the PM has had to defend his relationship with Qantas and its boss, Alan Joyce.
Yeah, well, this has come as a result of a few things that have happened. Qatar wanted to double its flights to Australia. Turkish Airlines wanted to fly direct to Australia. Both at the moment have been knocked back for that, which would have created more competition. And so what's the relationship between the government and Qantas is always argued. And then, of course, it's noted that his son, 23-year-old son, becomes a member of the Chairman's Lounge. That was in the Financial Review just in the last couple of days. So again, the Prime Minister has had to go on the back foot to defend all of these actions, but ultimately remember, this is about supply and demand and the reason why you're paying higher airfares right now.
All righty, Ross Greenwood there with the latest. Appreciate it, Ross. We'll talk to you again soon.